Okay, next up, we're going to talk about guitar gear and tone. Okay, and again, we're not going to get real deep in this, but I want you to understand how to get some of these sounds. So when you're playing, you can go, oh, I want a clean sound or I want a crunch sound. What do these things mean? Now, before we even get started with that, the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to look at the setup that I'm using right now. I'm using this Ibanez guitar, okay, and it's got humbucker pickups, okay, which are these things right here, okay. This one's called a single coil. These are called humbuckers, okay. A humbucker is essentially two single coils that are wrapped or wound together. Now, generally, as a result of that, there's a couple things that happens. Number one, you get less noise, and number two, you get more output. Now, I'm actually using pickups from a company called EMG, and they make what's called active pickups, which requires a battery as well. But they give you a wide range of sounds, and certainly for rock and roll, it gives you hard rock sounds, metal sounds, all things like that. But you can do all kinds of things with them depending on how you use your setup, which is what I want to talk about. So I'm running my Ibanez with my EMG pickups. You can see I've got a combination of humbuckers and single coils, and I'm running out to this amp. This is what I'm using right now. This is a Hughes and Kentner amp that I'm using. Now, before we go into the amp, let's just talk about the pickups a little bit. So I'm going to go to a cleaner sound here. Okay. Now, what I want you to notice that when I go cleaner, but I don't want clean, I want more crunchy kind of sounds. What I have a tendency to do is to move to my single coil pickup, okay? So right now I'm on this pickup. I moved my toggle switch and chose this sound. And it gives me that good old rock and roll slappy kind of sound. Now if I move to my humbucker again, you'll notice it gets quite fat and the distortion goes up a little bit. You see? So I use a lot of combination before I ever get to the amp. I use a lot of combination of volume and pickup switches. So right now on this channel that I'm on right now, which is just a crunch channel, it's not real distorted, but it's not clean. So that would be a really great sound for some good rock and roll, 70s style rock and roll, that kind of sound. Doesn't have to be from that era. I'm just saying that kind of sound. Great for that. Okay, so the misconception is that the pickups are only for metal. That couldn't be further from the truth. If I go to this single coil now, so I'm going back to this middle position, then I could get Doobie Brothers and stuff like that, or now, I'm not using any delay or reverb or anything. It's just, I don't think there's any reverb on there. Certainly not any delay. So you can see I can get these sounds, all of these varieties of sounds from one channel from this amplifier just by messing with my guitar a little bit. And I want you to think about that because oftentimes we don't realize the power that this instrument has. We just think that the amp is supposed to supply us with all these different sounds, and that's okay. Maybe it does. But the guitar can certainly do all of those by learning to pull back your volume a little bit, change your pickup selector a little bit. Or switching. So I'm sure you've seen me do it before, but I'm switching those things all the time because I'm trying to find a happy space with whatever it is I'm playing. As the song gets heavier, gets more mellow, I don't just keep playing or switch a channel necessarily. I tweak my guitar a little bit and find the sounds that I'm looking for. So it's so worth doing that. And it certainly helps if you got a decent amp. Like this amp is a really nice amp. And so the crunch channel is really able to give me a wide variety of sounds that I want. Okay. Now the amp, what I do with most of the amps that I play is I like to have at 2 or 3 channels. It's nice to have the channel that I'm showing you right now, because if I had to go clean, it's not clean. But it does clean up nicely. It's not clean though, okay? But I could get away with that. If I was on stage and I didn't have an absolute clean, I could get away with what I'm doing right now. But this channel, or this amp, does have a clean channel. Now the clean channel really is clean, right? So you might have an amp that has a clean and a dirty channel, or a gain, or a distortion channel, whatever, overdrive, all of these different words that we have for distortion, okay? Not clean. Okay, so I've got a clean channel, then I've got a crunch channel, and then I actually have a heavier channel, okay? So when I play with my heavy bands, there's more gain. And then I actually have a 4th channel, which is a lead channel, which is just the gain channel, a little bit louder, with some reverb and delay. You see? So oftentimes that's what I'll use for my lead channel, is I'll just take my high gain channel and I'll bump the volume just a little bit and then add a little reverb and delay, and that's what I'll use for my lead channel. That way my sound guy doesn't have to worry about boosting my leads and paying attention to me. He can do whatever he's doing and I can do my own thing, which is kind of nice. So that's kind of the premise of guitar tone. What I would recommend to you, a couple things, and then we're going to move on because I don't want to bore you with it. But with guitar tone, it's nice to not oversaturate or over-distort your tones all the time, okay? Now, I can't stress enough the importance of your guitar and how dropping back the volume of your guitar just a little bit can really clean things up and make a really great sound. There's a trick that a lot of players like Slash and people like that do. I'm going to go with my heavier channel here, where what they'll do is they'll drop their volume back a little bit, which is what I do on this heavier channel. So this is all the way up. But if I lower my volume just a little bit, you see it cleans up nicely. And it's nice to do that because then if I need just a little bit more for something, for some part of the song or something that's coming up, I can pull my volume all the way up and all of a sudden I've got a little more gain. So it doesn't require me to have all these channels again. I can just use my guitar to do that. Okay, so that's another little trick. So overall, try not to always have your guitar tones so overdriven that it just becomes muddy. And if for some reason you feel like you need a safety net and you need that overdrive, maybe you set that overdrive a little bit too hot, but then you roll back your volume a little bit, and that's kind of where you live when you play. And then if you need that for a solo or something, then you can bring it up and have your comfort zone. Something to think about. The next thing is the low, mid, and high on an amplifier. Generally, again, depending on the amp you have, if you have a Marshall, they don't tend to have a lot of low-end bass, if you will, where if you ran like a Mesa Boogie, they have a whole lot of bass. And the problem is if you run way too much bass, it just winds up getting really woofy when you are playing in front of somebody, certainly if you ever have to plug into a PA or something like that. Be careful of your low end. You don't need as much as you might think you need for a heavy tone or a rock and roll tone, and certainly for solos. Solos, that whole low end thing just kind of gets in the way often. So again, it might sound really cool in the bedroom, but that doesn't always translate well when you're trying to play, along with other people. That low end can get really in the way. I don't want to get off tangent, but if you think about a frequency, you have a drummer who has a snare drum, floor toms and a bass drum, and cymbals. Cymbals are high, snare is kind of in the center, and the bass and kick drum and all that stuff or the toms and everything are kind of lower. Bass is kind of lower. So where's the guitar supposed to sit? The guitar should sit in the center, not in the low end. There's enough stuff going on in the low end. We're kind of in the center register, okay? So that's where the mids come in. The mids are very important. The more you push those mids, the more you're going to be heard by your audience. Yes, it's more exposing because you can hear the guitar. When you turn those mids all the way off, it just sounds like this. This is what your guitar sounds like. which if you didn't hear me, that's the guitar, okay? So the mids, bringing those mids up really makes a difference in the guitar cutting through that mix. And then the high end is just to taste. It doesn't need to be brittle all the way up, and it doesn't need to be all the way off, just somewhere in the middle. I've always been told, and my sound guys will tell you the same thing, because I usually have really good guitar tone, and I'm not patting myself on the back, it just is that for the most part, if I have to take the low, mids, and highs and massively change them, I might not have the right amp for myself. They shouldn't need massive amounts of tweaking. It might just be a little bit here and there. But when the amp was constructed, it was constructed with the thought that if you ran everything just normal, just at 12 o'clock, if you will, that's the amp. Right? That's the optimal amp. Now, you might need to tweak a little bit here and there, but you shouldn't have to just, dime everything over all the way to the right or all the way to the left or something. Now, again, every amp is different, but it's just something to think about a little bit to try and get a better guitar tone out of what you're doing.